Hello, Poet House. Great to see you up and running again. I am Mervyn Taylor. Been writing for quite a while. I have at present um, seven full collections and one chapbook that came out during the pandemic period about Corona poems called News of the Living. I wrote that while I was on lockdown in Trinidad, which is where I'm from. And I hate to call it lockdown. It was really a good time for me to spend home, to sort of reacquaint myself with my family house there and to just be breathing that air for a while, you know. So I met Derek, well, through his poems earlier on, but I met him in person when I was in grad school at Columbia in the poetry program, and Derek was teaching there. And so it was a good connection for me. And Derek was graceful enough to introduce me at in the program called New Voices at the Y, not 92nd Street Y. I'm not sure which Y. I think it was on the west side. And new established poets introduce newer poets, and so he introduced me then, and that was a good beginning of our relationship. So today I want to read a poem of Derek's called "The Season of Phantasmal Peace." And I'm not sure which one of his books it's published in, but it's in this collection called Caribbean Poetry from Heinemann, who everybody might know was doing Caribbean work way back in the 60s and so on. I'm not sure if that press is still in existence, but he did a great service, Heinemann people. Maybe I'll take off these. The Season of Phantasmal Peace by Derek Walcott. Then all the nations of birds lifted together the huge net of the shadows of this earth in multitudinous dialects, twittering tongues, stitching and crossing it. They lifted up the shadows of long pines down trackless slopes, the shadows of glass-faced towers down evening streets, the shadow of a frail plant on a city sill, the net rising soundless as night, the birds' cries soundless, until there was no longer dusk or season, decline or weather, only this passage of phantasmal light that not the narrowest shadow dared to sever. And men could not see, looking up, what the wild geese drew, what the ospreys trailed behind them in silvery ropes that flashed in the icy sunlight. They could not hear battalions of starlings waging peaceful cries, bearing the net higher, covering this world like the vines of an orchard, or a mother drawing the trembling gauze over the trembling eyes of a child fluttering to sleep. It was the light that you will see at evening on the side of a hill in yellow October, and no one hearing knew what change had brought into the raven's cawing, the killdeer's screech, the ember circling trough, such an immense, soundless, and high concern for the fields and cities where the birds belong, except it was their seasonal passing, love made seasonless, or from the high privilege of their birth, something brighter than pity for the wingless ones below them, who shared dark holes in windows and in houses, and higher they lifted the net with soundless voices above all change, betrayals of falling suns. And this season lasted one moment, like the pause between dusk and darkness, between fury and peace. But for such as our earth is now, it lasted long. Okay, so that was Derek's amazing poem, The Season of Phantasmal Peace. And Derek had a way of doing these poems that focused upon people and upon a minute, but sometimes he would just take off into these broad arching poems, that just seem to cover all of humanity and all of the world, and every moment of existence, and to sort of um, almost optimistically sound a sort of a saving call, something that would um, keep us from the edge of whatever precipice we were looking over. He had that ability. So I thought I would follow this with a poem from um, from my book. This book is about 3 volumes past. It's called The Waving Gallery. And I don't know, you're too young to know this, but in the old days in the airports, before now the plane comes right up to the gate and you just walk right onto the plane. In the old days, well, at Piarco Airport in Trinidad, you'd have to come out of the airport, walk across the tarmac, and climb onto the plane. So as you walked across the tarmac in the airport building, there was always a gallery upstairs where relatives could go and wave at you, as you're going up the steps, and people would stop at the top of the steps into the plane and wave back at their people, or they would look out the plane window at their people still waving. They couldn't see them anymore, but they're waving. So going to the airport was a fancy affair. You'd go and you'd get dressed up and go in the waving gallery and sort of spend time up there, looking at people leaving and so on. So the title poem in this book, Waving Gallery, is about that. It's about my mom and other people coming to see me off. And I think in the poem, I think it says my mother's friend told her, "You better not cry." Remember, Mervyn said he doesn't want any cry. And I felt really bad about that because, my poor mom, of course she would cry, but I'm telling her, don't cry, don't cry. Of course, at the time you think you're a man now, you're traveling and so on, And now at my age, I'm so sad that I ever told her that. I wish I had boohooed with her. So this is a poem in here that's about Derek. I don't mention his name, but it's you can sort of pick up that I'm talking about someone that I had a lot of respect for. It's called The Mentor. And it's in sections. For section 1. In this dream, there were cows in every field and clouds floating above an island so green it seemed made of gases. And out of this arose the poet in a gray suit, as spry as I've ever seen him, quoting his mischievous lines, tireless, sparkling with metaphor, asking his trick question, "Are you coming with me? Are we going to find reasons?" "Not in this place," I answered, "where no one should ever starve or complain about things other than a gate left open through which a calf might wander and be stolen, causing dispute settled in devious ways." 2. You remember Lena. In the dream, she too was present, wearing a hat like a tea kettle cover, remarking those boys who live where she grew up, tattooing their bodies, a young girl every Friday hosting a perfume sale. It is rumored that this is the house of an outpatient that an outpatient was looking for when he went to the wrong address and used the wheelbarrow handle to beat the bedridden 90-year-old to death. Next door, those who harbored the one he was seeking, saying not a word, their weapons like marshmallows in their pockets, hands over their ears, blocking the sound of bones breaking and screams. 3. Cows cropped the grass, brown and white backs seen from above, the land and undulating waves below. Out of the few houses, people in black following funerals, fathers refusing to accept each other's apologies. They turn their backs, have conversations with their dead sons as they are lowered and the earth tamped. Ah, the poet smiles his ineffable smile. Those adverbs he warned against shuffle up. What will we do with them now that he is going, trailing long verses? The islands strung like cans behind a wedding, bells pealing in chapels whose stone walls he tries to rebuild. Sunday's blood in silver chalices, the host held high, the priest's voice intoning the liturgy, sunlight, stained glass, sin in sonorous 4x4 refrain. 4. This is where they reenact the story of sacrifice with animals, gold and greed, where the washing of hands goes on, governors and guards swearing each other away, poets swearing out poems like warrants, charges read in the language of verse, the one in gray citing history and places in the landscape that hold titles and deeds, the right to dream. So that's about Derek in a way, but it's also describing life and the changes in the islands. I remember talking to Derek once about what he thought the prospect of life in the islands were, and he says it could be good. He said, but there's just too much concern with vulgar ideas, surfeit of riches and so on. You know, so that's what that was about. I have another poem which I wrote after he passed away, shortly after he passed away, and I was wondering if I might share that one too. This is my most recent book. It's called A Country of Warm Snow, and this came out in 2020 during the pandemic, and it's the final poem in the book, written shortly after Derek passed away, and it's called the title is Donde Está. Donde Está for Derek Walcott in memoriam. And I use that phrase because while I was in class with Derek, he one of his favorite things was that expression, Donde Está. I remember one of the poets reading a poem to him and asking him to comment, and Derek listened patiently, and then at the end he said, ¿Dónde está la música, señor? Meaning that the rhythm was missing, and that was his one comment, ¿Dónde está? And I never forgot that. So whenever I write, I am constantly hearing Derek asking that question, ¿Dónde está? ¿Dónde está? ¿Dónde está for Derek Walcott in memoriam? Only last week, I sent you new work, thinking how many lines I should have changed before you received them, frowning and asking the old question, ¿Dónde está la música, señor? I had hoped you would read past the first 10 pages or so, getting to the good stuff, glasses reflecting the evening light coming off the VG headland, making sure my endings were no longer shrill, that they stopped like the wooden wheels of a donkey cart, the animal knowing where better than the driver. I've been practicing, Derek, holding each word like a dancer before the dip in the backyards where we boys got ready for the girls. I did not paint at an early age as you did. I looked at the living portraits of uncles and aunts, what the saga boys made of their rough-stitched, determined selves. These are what I sent you, sir, in disguise, hoping they would get through, that the winds might carry them to where you sat facing the sea. I had no idea they had already arrived, and you had thrown up your hands, impatient with one small error. Yeah. So since then, I think I've written about 3 or 4 poems to Derek or to his memory. And some of those are out now in a book called In Various Light, published by Helen Goethals. So I'm happy for this opportunity. Poets House was dear to me. I did one of my book launchings there, I remember. No Back Door. This must have been about 12 or maybe 15 years ago. New York would not be New York without Poets House.